Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On Thursday, the calendar rolls over to a new month, November, the month when championships are won in the Big Ten. That's what my guest today said in the Detroit Free Press on Sunday. Beat writer Nick Baumgardner joins us in just a moment. First, let's take a minute for my view from Section 17. When was the last time we started November and our path and mission was this clear? 2006 and 2016 would be the two most recent years that come to mind. We've had a week off after a physical and dominating win over rival Michigan State. I usually don't like the bye weeks when you're on a roll, but I think this one came at a good time. We can get healthy for the final 4-game stretch and put together a well-crafted game plan for this Saturday's opponent, Penn State. We're more than a 10-point favorite right now. Does that matter? It does in Vegas, but it won't mean squat when these two teams take the field. Penn State believes they are just a few bad plays away from being unbeaten. Now, we could debate that, but they are a very talented and young team with a quarterback I've always liked. He shows up in big games, has ice water in his veins. We have our own gunslinger quarterback this year in Shea Patterson. We brought him here to be a difference maker, especially in big games, especially in November. It's clear to see. The road to what could be a November to remember begins Saturday at 3:45 p.m. in the Big House. I'll be in my seat in Section 17, and something tells me we're going to bring it on Saturday. I can't wait. Nick Baumgardner says Michigan has proven to him they have the mental stones, as he said, to win the rest of their games. He joins us next year on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Back with us on our Game Day segment is beat writer Nick Baumgardner from the Detroit Free Press. Once again, great to have you back, Nick.
Good to be here, Mike.
Well, Nick, did you enjoy the bye week, having a chance to watch some other teams play instead of Michigan?
I usually try not to watch much of any any football on the buys, to be quite honest. I did see a few things, though, so yeah, it's always good. It's always good. This is a good time of year to do it, too. So couple weeks in, several weeks in, so yep, good stuff.
Well, last week we, of course, got the Michigan State stuff out of the way, and the team had a chance to, take a little break from it all 8 weeks into the season. Lots of talk about Rashawn Gary's status last week, Nick. Even his mother weighed in on his recovery. It sounds like he's going to know when he's ready to play. Isn't that about it?
Yeah, it sounds like that if his shoulder is healthy, he'll play. If it's not, he won't. I mean, it sounds, pretty pretty legitimate there. In terms of, cut and dry, he'd been playing hurt on it all year, frankly. And he got hurt last year with that too. I don't know if it's the exact same injury, but, he'd been playing hurt all year, obviously re-injured it again, and then they decided, he's not going to keep doing that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that was the best thing that Harbaugh probably could have said there in those couple of weeks is that, I don't know. I mean, we asked straight up, is this going to be something that costs them the rest of the year? And they don't know that. I think people immediately assumed, as they often do, that when someone else does something, that means this is happening too. So when Nick Bosa had to, call it a day due to his injury, I think people just immediately assumed, well, Rashawn Gary is going to do the exact same thing, and without any evidence, right, of proof or whatever. And so rumors start and everything else, but I mean, there's been no indication that's what's going to happen. But at the same time, I mean, no one's being ridiculous here and saying that, he's a first-round projected pick. I don't think he's going to risk, catastrophe in that situation if that were the case. But, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if he gets healthy and if it's all healed up, then maybe he plays. If not, then maybe he doesn't. And that's the reality of the situation.
Jim said it was an AC joint injury, and I think most of us know with that type of an injury, the key to healing is time on that injury. It does take time. Yeah,
and I think that when they decided, that this was going to be the case, I think it was probably the end of September. So that's about a month ago. And, it's been 4 weeks, whatever. I'm not sure that's long enough. But, I don't know how everything reacts. Everybody's health reacts differently. So, yeah, there it is. I mean, I think it was the situation of, he's either going to play on it hurt and risk re-hurting it, maybe, or he's not going to do that at all, and he chose the latter. And I can't blame him for that. I wouldn't blame anyone for that. That's your decision. I mean, it's your health. So, so I mean, that's pretty simple. I really don't know, and I don't think anyone will know except for him and his shoulder, I guess, when he's ready.
Well, in his absence, though, you have to say Josh Uche and Kwity Paye have played very, very well, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy part is that, as good a player as Rashawn is, the funny thing about it is actually during the Michigan State game, I think we went into that game, or, I went into the game anyway, thinking to myself, okay, we're going to have to ask about Rashawn after the game because he hasn't played, and we knew he wasn't going to play in that game either. And then as the game wore on, I totally forgot. And the crazy part, I forgot about Rashawn Gary because Kwity Paye and Josh Uche were playing so well, and together, they basically, created a somewhat semi-version of him. So, I mean, it was one of those things, it was the weirdest thing ever where it's like, you forgot about it because they played so well. And then after the fact, I remembered, but I was like, okay, we'll ask on Monday or whatever. But it was weird because they have played very, very well in his absence. And, that hasn't dropped off at all. So the crazy part, I guess, is that if they were to get him back, it would get, things would get really wild because you've now got, Uche, who's a terrific third down pass rusher, and then Kwity Paye, who can move inside, downside, and all of them can handle pass rush. So, it's been very interesting. And again, it's another hat tip to Greg Madison because he just keeps on keeping on here with, getting guys ready and next man up. I mean, nobody does it better than them. So, that's continued.
Other good news, though, on the injury front. Drake Black was practicing the week of the Michigan State game. Sounds like he's ready for action, and having him back and healthy would be huge down the home stretch, wouldn't it, Nick?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it raises their ceiling, offensively. I think that's what I wrote the other day is that, it changes the, obviously he would help. He's a good player. But I think the thing to remember here is that, Donovan Peoples-Jones has made giant improvements this year. He's really turned himself into a good football player, a good Big Ten receiver, a young up-and-coming type guy. Nico Collins is in the same boat. They've both turned themselves into starting, Big Ten receivers who are capable of getting open and making plays against anybody. And, you've still got Grant Perry who can play a little bit. You've got Zach Gentry, who's, I believe, still your leading receiver. So you add Tariq Black into the mix, and all of a sudden you're looking at, just another option in there, and just another option of what you can do offensively. So it raises their ceiling against better teams. I think in the bigger picture, if you're trying to win the Big Ten, you're trying to get to the playoff. It raises your ceiling offensively what you can do against good defenses, because it's one more option, one more weapon. And I don't know what he'll be, because that's the $1 million question, right? It's you've missed basically, you missed almost a full year last year. You've missed more than half of a year this year. I know that when he got hurt in September of last year, he was their best receiver, but I also know that was more than 12 months ago, and a lot has changed. And I don't know if is he back to exactly what he was, in terms of has he lost any step or anything else? I don't know that, but at the same time, we know he's talented, so it's like I don't want to sit here and say he'll walk in the door and immediately be their best receiver, because I don't know that to be true due to, number one, his health, and number two, other guys have played really well. So, but if he's healthy, it stands to reason that he'll come back and be an asset for sure. And another option in there to at least give people stuff to think about.
Well, for Week 9, Nick, other than the usual bumps and bruises and the Rashawn Gary injury, Michigan is in very good shape on the injury front, aren't they?
Yeah, this is one of those years where, it happens like this, and I think that a lot of times when teams are able to put themselves in these positions of, you go into November with an undefeated conference record, or you go into November with a chance to win the whole thing, usually you're in pretty good health shape, and that's one of those things that just kind of happens. It's nothing. Michigan's had years where that's gone the other way, and they've had years where it's worked out. And this is one of those years where any injuries they did have that were pretty bad were early, except for Gary. And Gary's the only one. And the random part there is that's maybe the one spot on the field where they could have sustained it, I guess. But any other injuries, Tariq Black, Aubrey Solomon, Chris Evans, those were all early in the season. Those guys all took 3-4 weeks off at minimum, 5 weeks off in some cases, and they were able to heal up. So I think that, they got some of their bad luck, it seems like anyway, out of the way in like August. So, we'll see if that continues for them. But yeah, they're in pretty good shape right now.
Well, this week Penn State rolls into town. I think it's a crazy spread, 11.5 points, something like that. And I watched their game on Saturday, Nick, against Iowa in Happy Valley. And man, give them credit. They made the play, that pick on the goal line, but they were lucky to get out of there with a W, weren't they?
Yeah. They remind me so much of what Michigan was last year. In like every way. They lost a lot of guys from the 2017 team that were super talented. Of course, Saquon Barkley was amazing. Gesicki was a really good college football player. Deshaun Hamilton was great. And then they lost a ton of guys on defense, who all either started or played big snaps, whatever. So they replaced them all with young talent, right? There's a lot of these young guys, Miles Sanders, KJ Hamler on offense, a lot of these younger players who played a lot on defense, who are all talented, but when you're young on the whole, maybe you're not quite ready for all of it yet. They do have Trace McSorley, and I think that's the one difference, but they have a very young football team. It seems like it's very inconsistent, and they're putting all of it on the shoulders of McSorley. So, I know he got dinged up a little bit in that game, came back and played. If he doesn't play well, they're in big trouble. And there have been times where he has played out of his mind, and they've still been in trouble. So they are not the same team. They have a lot of talent, but it is not the same group that we saw put up 40, whatever it was last year. When Michigan played Penn State last year, I'm not sure there was anybody in the country that was playing better, at least offensively, than Penn State was at the time. So very different team, still talented, but this is the one where I looked at. The funny part is when I looked at this back in August, it was, I thought Michigan would have more problems with Wisconsin and Michigan State than they would Penn State. I'm not sure if that's still the case. Things have changed, obviously, but I saw that spread as double digits, and it did not surprise me. I think that sounds about right, because, the way Michigan's confidence level is still what it was coming into the bye, and they're still, focused and everything else, then this is a team that they match up well against, especially defensively, and a team that they should be able to take care of at home. It's a perfect way to leave a bye, because you're at home, but you're still going to be challenged. So there's no, you don't have to. It's not like you're playing Rutgers, so you don't have to ease into it or just mess around. So it's a good challenge. They are talented enough, though. They are talented enough to make plays and challenge people. So all these games have been close for them, even Ohio State. So we'll see what happens.
Confidence is a big thing, and we know that with a young team, and as we all know, they have replaced a lot of NFL talent on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
You know, when you watch that team against Ohio State, I thought they really looked good. They looked confident. They looked impressive. But since then, since that loss, which was a gut-wrenching loss, I mean, against Michigan State, Indiana, and then Iowa, they've looked like a very different team to me.
Yeah, they look like their confidence is down. Is exactly what you're saying. I mean, that's the game against Michigan State that they played was, inexplicable at times when you think about it, and when you watched it, Michigan State's good defensively, but I mean, my goodness, I mean that was just they looked tentative, they looked scared. I mean, the sideline too. I mean, the play calling was horrible. I mean, that's I think it goes back to the offensive staff probably too, or the whole group. I mean, Joe Moorhead was their offensive coordinator who was so good there, and Joe Moorhead he played such a big role in helping James Franklin stop what was. I mean, if you remember back to like early 2016 or late 2015, James Franklin was on his way to getting fired. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. That thing was falling apart, and they were able to stop some really, really bad momentum and flip it and turn it. And had that great year there in 16, won the Big Ten, and then obviously had a really good year last year. But Moorhead was critical in that with his play calling and everything else, and he's gone. So when you lose him, you lose Saquon Barkley, you lose all those receivers. It's hard. And I think that when you don't have guys like that to lean on to get you out of problems, it can be a real challenge. And that's what seems like it's happening here. I mean, Miles Sanders is a talented running back, but he is not Saquon Barkley. And, a lot of this seems to have fallen on McSorley's shoulders. And if he's not able to, rush for 150 yards and throw for 200, they're in trouble, that's really hard to do. So, I mean, it's been interesting because they've kind of been up and down all year, even in their first game of the season. I know that App State was better than people thought, but it's been one of those years for them that's been, kind of a challenge, but, they're still talented enough. I suppose that's the best way of putting it when you look at it.
Well, I've watched their last 4 games, Nick, and what I come away with after those 4 games is they are putting an awful lot on Trace McSorley for obvious reasons. And he's bunged up now, too. But it's hard to imagine leaning on him against this Michigan defense is the key to success.
Oh, it can't be for them. I mean, Michigan would love nothing more, I think, if that were, if it were the case of, he has to be Superman or you're going to lose. I think Michigan would say, okay, great. If that's your game plan, then that's going to be real easy for us. Because if you're going to put the whole thing on one player's shoulders, we'll just take him away. I mean, he's a talented player, but what makes Trace McSorley go is usually having better athletes around him to create space for himself. So if they're taking everything else away and it's just him, he's not fast enough to, elude 3 guys and then take something 55 yards. I mean, a lot of times he gets space because people are worried about Sanders, or if they open things up, KJ Hamler, the kid that's I think went to Orchard Lake St. Mary's, he's from Michigan, super fast, young player who's played really well for them. There have been a few times this year where they've created space by just hitting big plays. They still run a lot of RPO and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's different when you're running RPO with Miles Sanders, KJ Hamler, and a couple other guys, as opposed to Saquon Barkley, Gesicki, and Dejon Hamilton. I mean, Barkley is maybe the best running back in the NFL right now. He's so good. So I mean, it's very different when you don't have that level of talent around you. And as good as McSorley is, that'd be a rough go, I think, to come in here and have to say, you're going to have to go win the game for us by yourself, which is what he's been doing the last, that's what he did at Indiana. That's what he did when they played Iowa. And Iowa's not a bad team at all, but that's what they asked him to do, and he was able to pull it off barely. But I don't think that's a recipe for success again this week. No,
and when you look at what they're up against this week, if Michigan brings the high-octane defense, which we're going to, it's just hard to imagine any way Penn State scores a bunch of points in this game.
Not like last year. This is not the. I mean, that's again. You heard Don Brown 2 weeks ago, or whatever it was, or last week, talk about how he's remembered this game for 12 months or whatever. He's thought about it every day. It was the worst game he's had since he's been here. Obviously, he wants to make amends for that. But even he knows that he doesn't have to do it against Barkley and these guys are gone. I mean, that's the big difference. It's like you don't have to play chess with Joe Moorhead. And I think that's the challenge. I mean, it's an ease off of your shoulders because they're good, but they're not as good. And Michigan's defense is a year better. like we said earlier, there's no real injuries other than Rashawn. They're pretty healthy. Depth is there, and you get them at home. So, yeah, I mean, Penn State's game plan would have to be probably to score some points early or score some points quickly, and then make Michigan play from behind. But I mean, boy, it's doing that in Happy Valley at night and with 100 and whatever people wearing the white shirts, and that's one thing. But doing it on the road without that type of talent against the number one defense in the country, that's a tall task. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't expect this to be a team where, Penn State's not exactly one they haven't been blown out. They haven't been run off the field by anybody at all. So, I mean, I'm sure they'll make it a game and they'll keep themselves in there. But their best plan of attack is to get up early and hope that Michigan has to play from behind, which is going to be very hard to do.
If they do get up early, what you have to look at, too, is that Penn State defense. They're giving up almost 450 yards per game. I know if you talk to Penn State people, they say their front is very, very good. They're very confident in that front, but they have plenty of holes on that defense, Nick.
Yeah, they've given up 440 a game or something like that for the last for in Big Ten play. I mean, if their front's very good, then that's not the case. I mean, they're not giving up 400 and something yards every game. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So their front's good. They have good pass rush, and it's a similar situation of, when their pass rush works, the rush yards go down because they rack up sack yards, and the passing yards go down because the quarterback can't throw the ball. It's a similar situation to what it was. Remember, they played Penn State, not exactly the same, but it's a similar situation when they played at Penn State a couple years ago, and they had that ferocious pass rush. But if you can survive that, you can pick them apart. And I think that's what we've seen. I mean, they've given up yards to everyone they've played. Illinois ran for 245 yards against this defense. So, I mean, I know that ended up being a lopsided game, but you're giving up 245 on the ground in Illinois, then you're gonna have a hard time convincing me that you're elite at anything defensively. So they're giving up points. Iowa scored points in Happy Valley. Iowa's offense isn't exactly lighting it up. Indiana had really not much trouble getting up and down the field at home there, scoring points. Michigan State obviously couldn't, really, but they did score some. We know how bad Michigan State's offense is. So, yeah, Penn State's problem really hasn't been offensively. McSorley's been able to figure it out. The defense hasn't been able to be consistent enough to play with it. I mean, it's been like that all year. They found themselves in so many shootouts, it seems like, or games that feel like a shootout. And that's not a recipe here. I just don't think their offense is good enough to keep that in it. Their defense will have to play its best game of the season, no doubt.
Well, as you reminded us in the Free Press on Sunday, championships are won in November. And for the first time in what seems like a long time, Nick, it's all right there for Michigan. They control their own destiny, don't they?
Yeah, this is the first time that I can remember that I've been doing this, that it's been as simple as this. I mean, you win them all and you go to Indianapolis, and you have a chance to play for the title. So that's really, it's black and white. There's no math needed, no scenarios or anything else. Win out and you get there, and when you look at it on paper, starting with this one, it's 4 winnable games. It's Penn State at home, obviously Rutgers on the road is winnable, Indiana at home is winnable, and Ohio State on the road. I mean, given what we've seen with Ohio State the last couple of weeks, that's a winnable game. And given what we've seen with Michigan the last couple of weeks and with Ohio State, that looks like a winnable game. So you have 4 right now. Your health situation's good for the most part. You're playing well. You have confidence. You just had your bye. I can't recall a time that they've had a better situation in front of them in terms of finishing something out and getting to the Big Ten title game, and with the West and the shape it's in, winning the Big Ten title. I mean, I can't recall a time in the last 10 years that they've had a better or clearer path to break this, whatever it is, 15-year skid than they have right now. And it's that's got to be the motivation. I think part of the motivation at Michigan State was we're sick and tired of listening to people talk about this like it's this thing. And now it's got to be, we are sick and tired of listening to people hang that over our head that we can't win, a Big Ten, whatever. And now it's 4 games away, 5 games away. So, now you have a chance to silence everything. And that's pretty big motivation at times.
Absolutely. And as we said, very clear path for Michigan. But over in the West, what a free-for-all. Northwestern, of all things, has a leg up in the West. Credit to Pat Fitzgerald, because his team they just find ways to get it done, don't they, Nick?
They do, and they also find ways to blow it. And I think that's what, because as we saw with Michigan, Michigan played well, of course, but I mean, down the stretch. But I mean, that's a 17-0 game, and when I saw that happen, and they come back and win, I'm just thinking to myself, how many times have I seen this from Northwestern over the years? But no, credit to them. I mean, they found a way. They beat Rutgers by 3, so they're finding a way. And the West is, like you said, it's just Wisconsin is not Wisconsin. That's Hornibrook's now hurt, so he didn't play last week. So that they're not, what they are. And Iowa is still Iowa. So I think if nothing else, I guess we'll see what happens in Indianapolis. But I mean, if nothing else, this sort of proves maybe once again how imbalanced these divisions are, because no one knows what's going to happen. In the West, Northwestern still has some tough games left to play. I think they have to play at Penn State. I'm not positive of that, but I think they do. So there's some challenges left ahead for them. But yeah, it looks like they're in the driver's seat there too, same as Michigan. If they win out in the Big Ten, they could still lose to Notre Dame here. That doesn't matter. But if they win out in the Big Ten, then they'll be going to Indianapolis. And hey.
Yeah. Do you think they have a prayer against Notre Dame this week?
They haven't been home. Notre Dame. I don't know. I think that if they can play the way that they've continued to play in terms of keeping things close and making people uncomfortable, but the hard part there is that that's going to be a road game for them at home. I mean, Notre Dame is going to really fill that stadium, so I wouldn't pick it. But I don't think Notre Dame's, other than a couple of these games early on this season, they've had some close ones too. So I wouldn't put it past them if they're in a football game with them.
It's been a very interesting Big Ten season so far, Nick. A lot of very competitive games that we didn't expect, and I guess a lot of us are wondering, is it parity or mediocrity?
Yeah, I don't know. It's always hard to say that, right? It's always hard to judge what that is because I think a lot of times nationally, we've always given the SEC the benefit of the doubt, right? With that, because we've seen these exact situations. We saw, Florida and Georgia playing last week, and Florida was ranked like 9th in the country. And I looked at that and said, that's nonsense. I mean, they're nowhere. They're not any good. I mean, they've scrapped some games together, but I wouldn't call Florida like a legit playoff contender or something. And what we do there is, Alabama's so good that I think Alabama rises all boats, right? Where it's like they get the benefit of the doubt. And then conversely, the narrative becomes, well, Ohio State's stumbling a little bit, even though they're only 7-1. They're not falling apart, but they're not what they've been. So maybe the Big Ten's not as good either. And that's, I think, usually what the narrative becomes. And that's that way because the Big Ten hasn't won a national championship in, other than, I guess, Ohio State won the one. But, I mean, that's it for, 10, 12 years. They haven't had the run of success like the SEC has. So narrative-wise, we understand that. But overall, I don't know. I don't know if it's, I don't know if I would say that there's a team in this league. I don't think there's anybody in the Big Ten that's better than Alabama. But at the same time, I don't think that it's been terrible. Michigan's continued to play really well. They've handled themselves the way that a team that now appears to be the favorite in the league should handle themselves. They only had one Big Ten game that was really close, and everything else, they handled Wisconsin, they handled Michigan State, they ran off Nebraska, they ran off Maryland. So, I mean, they're doing their job. I mean, they're playing at a pretty impressive pace. Ohio State can still turn it around, I suppose. But, it's hard because of the West. Maybe the East didn't turn out the way people thought it was, and I think that's why maybe people look at that and say it's a little bit more mediocre. But, the Big Ten West is not any good. I mean, that's the bottom line on that one. The Big Ten West drags the whole thing down. The whole balance of the league is out of whack, and I think it'll continue to look like that as long as you have the division split like this, because it's not going to turn. Everyone, it's cyclical. I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be a day where we wake up and say that Iowa is better than Michigan or Ohio State on an annual basis to be a number 2 team in that. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So it is what it is, but I suppose we'll see in January.
Well, final question for you, Nick. I had a listener ask me this yesterday, and he didn't like my answer, and it's because I suppose I'm cautious, but he said, ask Nick this question. After 8 games, why should we believe this Michigan team has what it takes to win out in November?
Mentally, they have what it takes. I think mentally they're tough enough. And that is probably, when you look back on it, or when I look back on it, it's probably the biggest question that I had is, are they mentally tough enough to navigate through, challenging situations? And when you are in a inexplicable 7-7 tie in a horizontal rain in East Lansing And I don't care if the quarterback's got one arm or not. You're playing a team that has had these voodoo curses over you for however long it's been. The easiest thing in the world would have been to panic and lose that game by like a couple scores. I mean, it would have been the easiest thing in the world to do. And we've seen Michigan teams here that would have done that, and they didn't. They did the opposite. I mean, they turned that thing around in a hiccup. I mean, Shea Patterson makes the play he makes, and then the offense gets the ball back and just takes Michigan State's life away on the ground. I mean, they just drove the ball down the field, down their throat, and won the game. So impressive mentally, in terms of edge and toughness and discipline and everything else that they had late in that game to make sure that thing was taken care of the way they wanted it taken care of. And that sets it apart for me. That's why all the other things that we've said over the year here that, Patterson's played really well. He's given them an improvement at quarterback. The receivers have improved a lot. The line has answered the bell and has become, something that is more than capable, it looks like. All of that's great, but really what it all adds up to is a team that has, kind of the mental stones to really hang in the late rounds against good teams and not wilt. And that's been their problem, over the years. It's been they've been able to, push some of these games right down to the end or whatever, push other games to the end, and they can't finish. And finishing has been the main thing. And I guess we'll see, right? Because November's here, and I guess we'll see if that's proven correct. But I think they have it. I think that's why I would buy it. That's why I would buy on them, and I would buy on them right now. I think that they're the favorite, and I think that's the only thing that makes sense. They played like it, they look like it, and I know people get nervous, but I guess we'll see. But it's all right there, and nothing looks impossible or even close to it for them right now.
No, you're right. November's here. Saturday, Penn State rolls in. Going to be a big one, so we shall see. Our guest here on the show today has been beat writer Nick Baumgardner from the Detroit Free Press. As always, Nick, great to have you on the show, and we'll get you back in another couple weeks.
All right, Mike, sounds good.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew.
On Quick Hits today, I think you're all used to this by now. Injury updates just don't happen with Jim Harbaugh, and that's okay. Will Rashawn Gary play? No one knows. From everything we hear, he will know when he's ready. Juwan Bushell-Beatty was injured in the state game, and the only thing we've heard regarding that was from some of his teammates this week, who said he will play this Saturday. As Nick and I mentioned, we are in good shape from an injury perspective after 8 games. On Thursday's Visitors Edition, my guest will be the longtime radio voice of the Nittany Lions, Steve Jones. We'll have the weather forecast for the game and injury information that's made available, and some game day facts for you. So make sure you come back on Thursday. If you don't have our show app by now, it's free at the Google Play and iTunes stores, or you can catch us on iHeart, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Wolverine Sports Radio. If you get the show from iTunes, please take a minute to comment or rate the program, and we thank you in advance. That will do it for this week's Game Day edition. It's November when championships are won. Let's hope we take that next step this Saturday against a very good Penn State team. We'll see you back here on Thursday. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!